Welcome back to the course. We are going to be looking at art vandalism for this section. Specifically, the question we are going to be answering is what motivates people to vandalize art or public property? So why do people decide to commit acts of vandalism against works of art or use art to commit acts against public property? So typically what this examines refers to the defacement or complete destruction of art or the use of art such as graffiti to deface public property. Now, for the purpose of this lecture, we are just going to be looking at vandalism in referring to the defacement and destruction of fine art rather than graffiti and commenting on whether graffiti is actually art or defacement or any such thing in that area. That would be reserved for a different class. Now, when we're talking about art vandalism, vandalism art is typically related to the intrinsic value of art. So we looked at art theft, and art theft is related to the monetary value. Now, art vandalism is related to the intrinsic value. People typically do not attack art because they're mad at the painting or the sculpture itself. They're mad at something else, or they're mad at something that the sculpture represents or something that the painting represents. So typically they're dealing with the art as a type of icon. And what this can lead to is what's called iconoclasm. And so iconoclasm is the action of attacking or assertively rejecting cherished beliefs and institutions or established values and practices, or the rejection or destruction of religious images such as heretical images. So iconoclasm has occurred numerous times throughout history. There's never been a time period where creation of art doesn't coincide with people being upset about something that is being created or upset about something people are believing in or producing, and so then resulting in destruction of those particular items. So we are going to be looking at a mixture of vandalism. Typically, when you're trying to learn about vandalism, you have to examine the different acts of vandalism that have occurred, and some of these acts of vandalism do have reasons, some don't, and then some of the reasons haven't been published for us to learn from. So it's an interesting mix of kind of how we're going to be examining this. So the first one we're going to be looking at is, again, the Mona Lisa. So we've looked at the Mona Lisa a couple times. We've looked at how she was stolen before, but now we're going to look at how she has been vandalized. So this is related to her status as an icon. So the Mona Lisa has been vandalized 5 times or has been attacked. So attempted vandalism since her return to the Louvre after being sent away during World War II. So we talked about how the Mona Lisa was stolen in 1911 and recovered in 1913, and then the Mona Lisa was put in danger again during World War II. So she was sent away for her protection, then when she was brought back and restored to the Louvre. And after that point, she has been a very famous piece in the Louvre, and anytime you're dealing with something famous, it's going to attract a lot of attention. So some people say she was only attacked 4 times, but she was attacked twice in 1956. The first one was unsuccessful. There was a visitor who attempted to attack her with a razor blade. The second attack was a man hurled a stone at her. She was behind glass at this point, so she wasn't damaged, although a slight bit of paint was nicked off due to the damage to the glass. That was repaired, and she has been fine since. Now, in 1974, she was on tour in Tokyo, and a woman, I believe it was either spray paint or poured paint all over her, or all over her protective casing. In 2009, a Russian immigrant was denied citizenship in France, and so she hurled a teacup at the Mona Lisa. And then most recently in 2022, a visitor to the Louvre disguised themselves as an old woman in a wheelchair and smeared cake all over the glass of the Mona Lisa. Now, for each end of these individual attacks, the person was never upset with the painting itself, but rather what the painting represents. Now, the painting could represent a few different things. The woman in 2009 was upset that she was denied French citizenship. The Mona Lisa is a very iconic painting representing France, so she is an iconic possession for France, and so they're very proud of her. And so this was the woman's way of expressing her frustrations. Now, in 2022, the most recent attempt at vandalism, the person who was committing it was trying to draw attention to environmental issues, and so he sought to draw attention in a very public way. So, in some cases, these vandalism have nothing to do with art themselves, but vandals are attempting to get attention for specific feelings that they're supposed to be drawing towards. Now, a couple of these other attempts at vandalism, I don't have a specific reason for them, but we're going to be examining them and kind of what happened and the aftermath for them. Particularly for this one, this is Rembrandt's The Night Watch, and this particular painting was attacked in 1975. Now, this one is interesting because this was an attack that occurred in broad daylight in the museum, in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. And so this painting was basically, it was slashed several dozen times, I believe, by an angry visitor, and with a kind of like a butcher's knife. And so the damage was pretty substantial, and so it entered into restoration for a long time, and they were able to restore it. But some of the damage still remains. And so the damage could still be seen all the way up until a couple years ago. Now, the painting was taken off display again, I believe, in either 2019 or 2020, and was put through another restoration, and that was to clean up the varnish and to clean the painting. And I believe they were attempted again to kind of make sure that the damage wasn't visible to visitors. So this would be something that, unless people knew it was there, then you wouldn't notice it. So the reason for this particular attack, I believe the person was deemed unstable, possibly, and so the reasons for it were never released, or were not released to a satisfactory reason for why this particular painting was targeted. But again, it doesn't have anything to do with the painting itself, but rather something about the person committing the acts, or something against what the painting could represent. The next one we look at is very similar in kind of how the person was dealt with. So this is another Rembrandt one, poor Rembrandt, Rembrandt's Diana. And so in 1985, a man threw sulfuric acid at the painting and then cut it with a knife. And so it basically resorted into a huge section of this painting was destroyed. This entire center part of the painting was completely destroyed by the sulfuric acid and by the slashing of the canvas. And so the reason behind this one is that, again, the person was deemed unstable, and part of it was looking at this as a symbol of Russian power, and the man was protesting against it. This painting is in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, and so this person they believe was commenting on the Russian power at the time and protesting against it and everything like that. And so this did take a long time to restore. It took nearly 12 years to restore it, and they have restored it to working condition. It will never be the same as it was, but it is manageable, and people who don't know or who aren't aware of the history of the destruction won't see it when they see this painting in person. Now, this particular act of vandalism is very odd. This one, it's the same as some of the other reasons, but it's just a very unusual kind of result. So this is Michelangelo's Pietà. So this was an instance in 1972. So a geologist, Laszlo Toth, I have this one's name, he attacked the sculpture, and he had a geologist hammer with him, and through the process, he was yelling out, "I am Jesus Christ." Now, through the process of his trial, he was also deemed unstable, and as a result of having a lot of unresolved feelings towards the maternal aspect of his life, and so he took out his frustrations on a very prominent mother figure and a very prominent sculpture representing motherhood. But he was committed, I believe, and then he was treated and released later, and so kind of lived, I think he might still be alive, lived out at least the rest of his life in relative peace. Now, what was kind of annoying about this particular attack, when it occurred, he smashed the left arm almost completely, and then part of the face, I believe the nose and part of the cheekbone. And the visitors who were in the museum at the time helpfully picked all of the pieces up and were collecting them, and were kind of just taking out of the museum with them. Most of them are recovered, and this particular piece, the Vatican collection is really good about making sure they have good images of their works of art, and so they were able to repair the sculpture. And so then this was fixed using the same marble that Michelangelo, the marble mine where the marble came from, is still in existence, and so they were able to get the same type of marble. Now, what is annoying about the result of this one, this sculpture used to be out for people to get really close to, at least a couple feet away. Now the sculpture is behind bulletproof glass in a room, kind of by still in St. Peter's Basilica, but still kind of off to the side in a glass kind of encased room. So you can't really get close to it. You can get about maybe 10, 15 feet away from it, but you can't see it up close anymore. And so that is a very sad outcome for this particular act of vandalism, is it denied people the right to get close to this particular sculpture. Now, this one is Leonardo da Vinci's Virgin and Child with St. Anne. So this one is another interesting one because he was again deemed unstable, but I do have a question of kind of how this particular one took place. So for this particular one, you had the Virgin and Child drawing in the National Gallery of London, and so it's behind bulletproof glass. A lot of paintings are being put behind bulletproof glass now, paintings and drawings and such, because of the damage that's being caused to them. So Robert Cambridge took a sawed-off shotgun into the National Gallery and shot the drawing. Now, the shotgun didn't damage the drawing itself. What damaged the drawing was the glass shattering and splintering against the paper. This is a paper drawing, and so it was highly damaged, and it had to go years of repair in order to fix it and return it back to kind of what the state of it was. Now, moving into something a little harsher than art vandalism, moving into the concept of art destruction. So we aren't just talking about paintings or drawings or sculptures that have been defaced or damaged in any particular way. These particular works have been completely destroyed to the point where they no longer exist, or they no longer exist in the state where they once were. So this is Jean Metzger's Encanto, and this particular painting, this is the only thing that remains from this. This is a black and white picture that was taken from a negative. The painting no longer exists. It was displayed as part of the degenerate art exhibit toured by the Nazis in 1937 and 38. So the Nazi regime, the Nazi government, when they were using propaganda art, there were certain types of art that they deemed as degenerate or unnatural. And part of that was this collection of early 20th century art dealing with more abstracted or non-objective art subjects, and the German Expressionist movement, which was a huge part of modern art at the time. So a lot of these works were collected and put into this degenerate art for people to see it with labels that this was unnatural, this caused unnatural feelings in people, it caused unnatural things. And so a lot of the paintings after this exhibit went up, a lot of these paintings, a lot of these works of art, they disappeared. And so it's presumed that they were burned. There is evidence that the Nazis were participating in the burning of art and books, literature, and other similar types of artworks and fine arts, as kind of a cleansing to make sure that they wouldn't be around anymore to poison Germany, the fatherland. So it is presumed that this painting has been destroyed, and the only thing we do have left of it, like I said, is this black and white picture taken from a negative. So while we still have kind of the spirit of the work of art, we no longer have the work of art itself. Now this one is another one that's a little annoying because this work technically still exists, but what the deal with this one is, there is a documentary, I believe I have linked it to the extra features for this lesson. So this is one of the Barnett and Newman paintings. So Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, Blue 3. So in 1986, Gerard Jan van Balderen took a knife to the painting and slashed it horizontally through the canvas. So slashed it completely from left to right. And this was meant to be a commentary for particular feelings and such at this time. And so the work was put through restoration, and it is believed that the restoration process actually destroyed the work of art because it destroyed a lot of the aspects that made this particular painting unique and individual, which was the artist's touch and how the artist did the brushstrokes through the red section, or how he applied the blue and the yellow stripes. So this is kind of why art restoration is very controversial, even though it is useful to make sure that paintings are clean and still visible for people to see, and that if paintings or sculptures are damaged, that the art restorers can fix them. But there are art restorers who are not as qualified as other ones. And so for this one, the art restorer used a completely different type of paint and put it on top of the whole canvas and used the wrong type of material. They used a paint roller, I believe what the final verdict was, and so it completely destroyed the painting. So while this painting still exists and it is still on display, it is not the painting that it was when it was first viewed. So it has been deemed as a destroyed work of art. And then finally, for the last one, this is probably one of the sad ones for me because I love this area and I love this time period. So this is the Palace of Ashurnasirpal. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Ashurnasirpal II. This was in Nimrud in the kind of like Syria area. And so this historically is part of the Assyrian Empire, and the Assyrian Empire was one of the most powerful empires at this particular time in the world. And so Nimrud, the city, dates back to the 13th century BC, and the Palace of Ashurnasirpal dated to about the 9th century, so mid-9th century, so like 850, 830s BC. And so this site was completely destroyed by the Islamic State in 2015 when they bulldozed and basically detonated the entire city because they viewed this as heretical images against the Islamic belief system, because this was venerating the ancient Assyrian people and the historical aspect of the area. So this destroyed not only the palace, it destroyed the ziggurat of the city, but also the guardian lamassu that you can see right outside the palace here. So the lamassus are historical guardian deities of the Assyrian people for the Assyrian Empire, and so to lose even more of them through this kind of massive destruction due to iconoclasm is very traumatizing and very damaging for art in general. So this is part of art vandalism to the extreme end, where you result in iconoclasm. Now you could also say this is a type of art censorship, which is what we're going to be talking about in the next lesson as the very kind of last aspect of art crime. The odd thing about that one is that censorship is not often considered a crime, even though this level of destruction, even though it's part of art vandalism, it is also part of art censorship. So make sure that you tune in for that lesson as well.